Chapter 1. The Departure. We left the village before the first light of dawn, our footsteps echoing on the empty road as if the earth itself wanted to remember us, and the cold mist clung to our faces like invisible chains that try to pull us back. Our packs were heavy with tools, food, and fragile hope, yet each step seemed to double their weight, reminding us that fortune never comes free. The legend of hidden gold inside the forest had burned into our hearts for months, whispered in taverns, carved in old maps, told by men whose eyes had once gleamed with madness. And now, it was our turn to follow the trail. Mark led the way, his machete strapped across his back, shoulders stiff with pride and stubbornness, while Anna walked beside me, her eyes searching the horizon as if she already sensed the dangers waiting ahead. Lily struggled under the burden of her pack, but her spirit was unbroken, her jaw tight with determination, while James marched silently, counting our supplies and muttering about how quickly water could vanish in a place where rivers lied and streams poisoned. The morning air smelled of damp soil and smoke fading from the village. Chimneys behind us, and I knew once we crossed the ridge, there would be no turning back. We walked until the sun rose like a red coin, the sky blazing with fire that seemed to mock our greed. And the forest loomed closer, a wall of green shadows, breathing secrets. By midday, sweat drenched our shirts, the straps cut into our shoulders, and our boots sank in a mud that clung like claws. But none of us complained, because complaining would mean weakness, and weakness could kill. We stopped by a shallow stream, the water clear, and as I bent to drink, my reflection shivered in the current, looking less like a man and more like a ghost beginning its last march. "Do you really think it's real?" Lily asked softly, her voice trembling like the leaves above us. No one answered at first, until Mark finally said, "It has to be, because if it isn't, then everything we are is already lost." His words settled heavy in the air, and we drank in silence, each of us carrying the same fear, but refusing to admit it. When we pressed forward, the forest greeted us not with welcome, but with resistance. Vines tangled around our legs, branches whipped across our faces, and swarms of insects rose like black smoke, biting until our skin burned. The deeper we went, the darker it grew, until even midday felt like twilight, and our torches became more comfort than necessity. Strange cries echoed from unseen creatures, and once we heard a howl so deep it shook our bones. But when we froze to listen, the forest grew silent, as if mocking us with secrets it would not share. That night, we camped beneath twisted trees whose roots rose from the ground like bones, and our fire barely pushed back the dark. Shadows moved beyond the flames, shapes that melted away. When we looked, and though Mark insisted it was only animals, I gripped my pickaxe as if it were a weapon, ready for a battle I could not name. Sleep came slowly, broken by nightmares of rivers, flowing with blood and hands reaching from the soil, and when dawn arrived, we woke pale and restless. The second day tested us harder, with steep climbs over ridges where rocks cut our hands, and swamps that tried to swallow our boots whole, but we pulled each other through, bound by the promise of gold. Hunger gnawed at us, water ran lower, and James cursed under his breath, warning that greed could starve us before treasure ever filled our hands. Still, we moved forward, chasing the whispers of fortune, and when the sun broke through the canopy at last, we saw a stream glittering faintly, its water flashing with colors too bright to be ordinary. Hearts pounding, we dropped to our knees, scooping with trembling hands, and though no nuggets appeared, we saw dust like sparks of fire swirling in the gravel. Gold, real gold. We shouted, laughed, and cried, the sound wild enough to shake the birds from their trees, and for the first time since, leaving, hope felt like a weapon in our hands. Mark swore we would follow the stream upstream until we found its heart, where fortune would flow like a vein through the earth. That night, we camped by the golden stream, guarding it like a sacred altar, and the flames of our fire flickered in eyes already burning with fever. But the forest whispered louder than before. Voices like distant laughter, and I knew deep inside that the gold was real, but so was the curse that came with it. Still, as I lay awake, clutching my pickaxe and staring at the shadows, I told myself we would be different, that we would survive, and that the gold would be ours no matter the cost. Chapter 2: The Golden Streams. The stream became our guide, winding through the valley like a silver serpent, its water sparkling under rare shafts of sunlight that pierced the canopy. And each glimmer pulled us deeper into the forest with promises too strong to resist. We walked with renewed energy, our hunger and thirst momentarily forgotten, because the sight of golden dust in. The water had confirmed what our hearts desperately needed to believe. Mark pushed us forward with reckless urgency, his machete slicing vines and branches as though the very jungle stood in his way. While James grew quieter, his eyes fixed constantly on our dwindling supplies, worry carving lines into his face. Anna hummed softly as she walked, a fragile melody that broke the silence, perhaps to keep fear away, while Lily stumbled more often now, her legs trembling from fatigue, though she smiled whenever her gaze fell on the glittering water. The forest grew denser, shadows overlapping until even noon felt like twilight, and the air turned thick and wet, clinging to our skin like a suffocating blanket. Strange cries echoed above us, sometimes shrill, sometimes guttural, and every time we stopped to listen, silence answered, heavy and absolute. We found animal tracks near the banks, larger than any we had seen before, and claw marks raked across. Tree trunks, yet none of us dared to speak of predators, as if silence could make them less real. By midday, the stream narrowed into a rocky gorge, the water rushing faster, and we had to cling to the walls to keep from being swept away, our packs dragging us toward the current. Mark slipped once, nearly tumbling into the torrent, but Anna caught his arm with a strength born of fear, and together they scrambled back to safety, leaving us shaken. When the gorge widened again, we saw it. The first nugget, small but undeniable, lying on the stream bed like a piece of sunlight trapped. In stone, Lily screamed with joy, scooping it up, her hands trembling so violently she almost dropped it, and we all crowded around, staring as though it were holy. The fever of gold took us, instantly burning hotter than fire, and we fell to our knees, panning gravel with frantic hands, searching, hoping, needing. Soon more appeared, tiny flecks, then larger pieces, until our vials glowed with treasure, and exhaustion vanished beneath the rush of triumph. That night, we camped beside the stream, the pile of nuggets between us shining in the firelight, our eyes reflecting its glow like predators circling prey. We laughed louder than we had in weeks, voices high and wild. And for the first time we felt invincible, as if fortune had already chosen us as its heirs. But when the laughter faded and sleep crept close, I saw shadows moving at the edge of the firelight again, shapes too deliberate to be tricks of flame, and though I gripped my pickaxe tightly, I told no one for fear of shattering the fragile joy. Morning brought rain, heavy and merciless, drenching us as we followed the stream higher into the mountains. But the water only revealed more. Golden dust, and we pressed on with obsession. Hunger gnawed at us now, food nearly gone, and James warned again that we must ration carefully. But Mark snapped at him, shouting that fortune meant nothing if we wasted time worrying. The argument ended in silence, but the tension lingered, a new weight on our shoulders heavier than the packs themselves. Days blurred together, endless climbs, endless digging, endless searching, until our bodies screamed for rest, yet our minds refused, because greed drowned all weakness. We reached a waterfall one evening, its roar shaking the ground, spray rising like mist, and beneath the rushing water, we saw it, shadows of gold glimmering on the stones below. Mark was the first to plunge in, the current nearly toppling him, but when he returned, With nuggets clutched in his hands, larger than any we had yet seen, we screamed like madmen. We worked until nightfall, our arms raw, our legs trembling, but our sacks grew heavier. And the fire that night burned brighter than any before, fueled not by wood, but by victory. Yet victory came with whispers in the dark, laughter drifting through the trees, and the sound of footsteps. Circling our camp when no one was awake to walk. I woke in the middle of the night to see Anna staring into the forest, her eyes wide, lips trembling, and when I asked what she saw, she only shook her head and whispered, "They're watching." Morning revealed nothing, only damp ashes and our growing pile of treasure, but her words lingered, curling like smoke in my mind. The deeper we went, the stranger the forest became. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, rivers that split and rejoined as though alive, and the air thick with a smell of iron that clung to our clothes. Lily coughed often now, her face pale, but when we suggested resting, she shook her head fiercely, whispering, "I can't stop. Not now. Not when we're so close." The fever of gold consumed us, all, binding us tighter than blood, yet also pushing us further apart, for every glance at the treasure carried suspicion. Who would take more? Who would betray? Who would survive? One evening, when James tried to hide a nugget in his pocket, Mark grabbed him, shouting, and it nearly came to blows until Anna forced them apart, her voice breaking with desperation. The gold had begun to rot, our unity, just as the forest had rotted our strength, and I feared that soon we would be more dangerous to each other than the jungle itself. Still, when we lay down that night, our sacks full of treasure, I could not help but smile, because the dream was real, the gold was ours, and tomorrow promised even more. Chapter 3. The Curse of Greed. The days that followed blurred into one long fever. Every sunrise dragging us deeper into the valley where the streams glowed like veins of molten fire, and every sunset leaving us crouched by the water, our hands raw, our backs broken, our minds clouded by the endless shimmer of gold. At first, laughter carried us through exhaustion, but soon it twisted into arguments, sharp words cutting deeper than knives, because each nugget we pulled from the stream felt less like shared fortune and more like personal victory. Mark became restless, pacing around camp with his machete always at his side, his eyes darting to our sacks of gold as if weighing them, while James grew colder, counting every piece with obsessive precision, his suspicion of theft poisoning the air. Anna tried to keep peace, her voice soft and pleading, but even she began to hide small flecks in her pocket, thinking no one noticed. Though I did, and said nothing because I too felt the hunger. Lily coughed harder each day, her strength fading, yet she refused to rest, clutching the gold with trembling fingers, whispering that fortune was worth dying for, and perhaps she already believed her fate sealed. The forest around us seemed to feed on our discord, its shadows growing thicker, its silence heavier. And sometimes when I closed my eyes, I swore I heard whispers that were not from my friends but from the trees themselves, urging us to dig deeper, take more, never stop. One night, as we sat by the fire, a sudden crash echoed from the darkness, branches snapping under heavy weight, and before any of us could move, glowing eyes appeared beyond the flames. A massive shape lingered, low and snarling, but when Mark threw a burning branch into the dark, the thing retreated, leaving us shaking and sleepless until dawn. The next morning, we found claw marks gouged into the trees around camp, deep and furious, proof that the forest had beasts larger and hungrier than we had ever imagined. Yet even this did not deter us, for the gold shone brighter than fear, blinding us to danger. As the days stretched on, our food dwindled to crumbs, and water grew scarce when streams forked into poisoned branches that left us sick. Yet still we dug, still we searched, still we bled for treasure. James accused Mark of hoarding. Mark accused James of sabotage, and soon fists flew, the fight only broken when Anna screamed, tears streaking her face, begging us to Remember why we came. But even her voice could not silence the poison that had seeped into us, for greed had taken root, and once it blooms, it cannot be pulled out. That night, Lily's coughing worsened until blood stained her lips, and as we tried to comfort her, she clutched a nugget in her hand, refusing to let it go even as her strength ebbed away. She whispered through gasps, "Don't stop. We're so close," before sleep claimed her, shallow and restless. And though she woke the next morning, she was weaker, her eyes clouded with fever. The forest seemed to sense her. Weakness, circling closer, and twice I caught shadows moving just beyond sight, always retreating when I raised my torch. One evening, we followed the stream into a cave, drawn by the sound of rushing water echoing within. And inside we found walls glittering with golden veins, the earth bleeding treasure in every direction. The sight drove us mad with joy, and we hacked at the stone with reckless abandon, filling our sacks until they nearly burst, our laughter bouncing off the walls like thunder. But in that frenzy, we did not hear Lily collapse until it was too late. She lay on the ground, her breath shallow, her skin cold, and though we tried to revive her, she slipped away with a faint smile, her hand still wrapped around a single golden pebble. The silence that followed was heavier than stone, our triumph rotting into grief. And yet, even as we buried her beneath the earth, we could not leave the gold behind. That night, Mark whispered that her death proved the forest demanded sacrifice, that fortune would not come without blood. And though his words chilled me, none of us argued, because deep down, we believed it too. The cave became our home for days, our firelight glinting off the walls until sleep was impossible, our dreams haunted by Lily's face and the whispers of unseen voices echoing in the dark. Food was gone, our bellies hollow, and thirst burned our throats. Yet still we dug, still we filled sacks, still we cursed each other with every glance. James became paranoid, accusing Anna of stealing while she wept, and Mark threatened him with a machete, forcing me to intervene before blood spilled. But the tension only grew, stretching like a rope ready to snap, in the forest. Outside roared with storms, rain pounding the earth, lightning splitting the sky, as if nature itself raged against us. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps inside the cave, too heavy to be human, and when I raised my torch, the shadows danced but revealed nothing, leaving me trembling with dread. Sleep abandoned me entirely after that, my eyes fixed on the dark corners where I swore. Something waited, patient and silent. When dawn came, we discovered claw marks along the cave entrance, deeper and fresher than before, and fear finally cracked even Mark's stubborn pride. "We can't stay here," he muttered, voice low and hollow. "The forest doesn't want us here." But even as he said it, his hands never released the sack of gold at his side, and I knew leaving would be harder than staying, because the gold had already bound us tighter than chains. As we packed to move, Anna clutched Lily's pendant around her neck, tears in her eyes, and whispered that the forest had taken enough, but Mark only growled that we were not done, that fortune demanded we see it through. And so we marched again, 3 instead of 4, our footsteps heavy with grief and greed alike. Deeper into the forest where the streams promised more, but the shadows promised death. Chapter 4. The Final Descent. The forest closed around us like a living cage, its branches reaching overhead to blot out the sun, its roots twisting across the ground to trip our every step, as if the earth itself sought to keep us prisoner. And though we had lost Lily, still we carried sacks of gold heavier than our grief. The weight dragged on our shoulders, grinding our bones. But none of us would let go, for even in sorrow the fever burned, whispering that to abandon the treasure now was to betray her sacrifice. Mark led us with wild eyes, his machete swinging too, quickly, cutting not just vines but branches that posed no threat, as though every shadow was an enemy, while James muttered numbers under his breath, calculating and recalculating how much each of Us carried. Anna clung to her pendant, whispering prayers under her breath, though I did not know if she prayed for our survival or for forgiveness, and I wondered if the gods could even hear us in a place so cursed. Hunger hollowed our bellies until we could barely stand. Thirst cracked our lips until every sip of dirty water felt like poison, and still we pressed forward, chasing streams that shimmered faintly with golden dust like bait for desperate prey. Storms tore the sky above, rain lashing against us, lightning splitting the night into shards of white fire, and twice we nearly lost everything when the swollen river tore away our camp, forcing us to cling to the rocks like drowning rats. One night, when the fire sputtered low, James accused Mark of stealing extra nuggets, his voice sharp with fury, and Mark lunged with a machete, the blade flashing in the firelight. But I threw myself between them, shouting that if we killed each other, the forest would finish what? Greed had started. The fight broke, but trust shattered beyond repair, leaving only silence and eyes that watched too closely. The next morning, we discovered footprints circling our camp, too large to be human, pressed deep into the mud. And though Mark claimed we could fight whatever stalked us, fear carved hollows into his bravado. We moved faster, stumbling through vines and mud, but the forest mocked us with endless walls of green, twisting paths back upon themselves, and more than once I swore we had passed the same gnarled tree again. Days blurred into nightmares, each moment filled with hunger, thirst, fear, and gold. Always gold, always the weight of it pulling us down, yet never enough to satisfy. Anna grew pale and quiet, her eyes distant. And one evening, she confessed to me that she heard Lily's voice in the trees, calling her deeper into the forest, begging her not to leave the gold behind. I wanted to deny it, but I too had begun to hear voices in the night, whispers curling through the leaves, promising wealth, power, and eternity if only we kept digging. Mark became more unhinged, speaking less to us and more to the nuggets he carried, clutching them in his fists as though they could answer him. And James's suspicion twisted into paranoia, so deep he stopped sleeping, his eyes bloodshot and hollow. The forest grew crueler, tearing at us with storms, swarms of insects, and shadows that lingered just out of reach. And I realized too late that we had become part of its game, pawns in a trap spun long before we arrived. One night, the whispers grew louder, clearer, telling us to go to the caves where more gold waited. And despite everything, we followed, driven not by reason, but by fever. The caves yawned like mouths in a mountainside, their darkness absolute, their air heavy with the stench of damp stone and old death. But we lit torches and pressed in, sacks clinking with every step. The walls glittered faintly with golden veins, driving Mark into a frenzy, his machete striking stone as he screamed that fortune was his alone, while James shouted back, demanding his share, until the cave echoed with fury. I tried to stop them, but greed had made them deaf, and the argument ended when Mark swung the machete, striking James across the chest, blood blooming like a dark flower on the rocks. James fell gasping, his eyes wide with shock, his hands scrabbling at the ground. But even as he died, his fingers clutched at the nuggets scattered from his bag. Anna screamed, the sound tearing through the cave, and Mark stood trembling, his chest heaving, the blade dripping red, muttering that it was necessary, that the gold demanded it. I stared at him in horror, realizing the forest had won. That greed had devoured us until murder felt justified. We buried James in shallow earth near the cave mouth, though Mark wanted to leave him. And as we covered the body, Anna whispered that the gold had cursed us from the beginning. Mark ignored her, his eyes wild, his hands still clutching the machete. And I knew he was no longer the friend I had followed into the forest, but something else entirely. We pressed deeper into the cave, though dread twisted my stomach, and soon the ground gave way to an underground river, its waters shimmering with more gold than we had ever seen, flakes swirling like fireflies beneath the surface. Mark screamed with triumph, plunging into the water, scooping handfuls of treasure, his laughter echoing madly off the stone. But the current was swift, stronger than any man, and it dragged him under. Anna and I reached for him, but he vanished into the black, his screams cut short, leaving only the roar of the river and the glitter of gold where he had stood. We collapsed on the bank, shaking, our sacks heavy, our hearts broken, and for the first time, I wanted to drop the gold and run to flee the curse that had taken all of us. Anna clutched my arm, her eyes hollow, whispering that we had to leave, that no fortune was worth the dead, and I nodded, though my hand still trembled around the sack on my shoulder. We staggered out of the cave, back into the storm, the forest roaring around us, branches clawing at our faces as if trying to pull us back, but somehow we stumbled to the edge of the valley where the trees thinned. The road home stretched before us, endless, merciless, but open, and with every step we left behind the screams, the whispers, and the dead. When dawn rose at last, Anna and I stood on a ridge overlooking the forest, our sacks still heavy, our bodies broken, and the gold inside gleaming like the eyes of the dead. She whispered that we should throw it away, bury it, let it die in the earth, but I could not, for even after everything, the fever still burned. And so we walked onward, two shadows carrying the weight of 800 lies, the forest watching silently behind us, waiting for the day it would call us back.